I want to welcome everybody for coming to our presentation today. We're very lucky. We've got two really excellent speakers, Greg Feldman and Benjamin Guerrero, who's going to be replacing Greg when he retires next year. That's Holly Rothstein couldn't come today because of the fact that she's in Tallahassee, and Catherine Vogel couldn't come today because she's in Portland, Oregon. Before we introduce Greg, let's go around the room real quickly and everybody introduce themselves. Let's start with Ida and say kind of like why you're here, what your interest is, etc.
My name is Ida Sawadsky-Bricker. I am part of United Methodist Women, whose focus this year is on human trafficking. I'm also social services director for the Upper Keys, so supervisor, not director. But I'm glad to be here, and I thank Vicki for all you're doing.
Well, welcome.
I'm Suzette Gibson. I'm with Women's Missionary Union of the Southern Baptist Convention. We've had human trafficking as an effort that we're focused on the last 2 years, and will continue to do so. So it's very something we're going to really be a part of addressing.
And you're one that's been so instrumental in working with Gibble to get the Freedom website up, is that right?
Yeah, Work for Freedom is our website, which
And
has resources of all kinds, and we're fine-tuning it and getting ready to make some changes. But
and
it's a one-stop shop, sort of.
Right. It's on the bottom of the agenda. We put both the website for the coalition and also the website for Keys for Freedom. And if you ever get a chance, try to see if you can get some other people to take a look at the websites. I encourage that. Gibble's back in the corner, actually.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Gibble Berkeley. I'm with the Keys Coalition, Weekend of Prayer, and Keys for Freedom. I try to maintain the websites and keep the marketing going whenever I can, posting updates. And one of the things that I think is great about our websites is there's lots of tools for people to use to act now. So I'm glad everybody's here. And if you need any cards for to give out to people in regards to the number to call for victims, just ask me. I've got a few.
That'd be great if you could pass them out. Shelley, good to see you. Thank you for coming.
I'm Shelley Grabiak, a victim advocate at Temesco Beach Shelter. I work at the Key Largo Outreach Office. We do have two shelters, one in Marathon and one in Key West, and another outreach office in Key West. We do crisis counseling in our shelter, and we'll do classes on for domestic violence and also sexual assault advocates.
Very good. Excellent.
Let's see, I'm in a bunch of different groups now, BPW, League of Women Voters. I work with seniors, I work with Edith a lot, and interested community member.
Thank you. Greg.
Well, you're introducing me very well. I'm Greg Feldman, the Regional Criminal Justice Coordinator for the Florida Department of Children and Families, and you're going to be subjected to me for a few minutes up there.
Thank you.
And I'm Ben Guerrero, and I'll be replacing Greg, which is going to be hard to do. It's hard, big shoes to fill. But I work for DCF, and I'm currently the Human Trafficking Coordinator.
Thank you very much for coming. I appreciate your taking the time. And I talked to Michelle this morning on the phone.
I was very interested when I saw it in the paper. You know, years ago I was, molested as a child. So it's like I did a lot of therapy, and how I've done is I've dedicated my time to helping youth sports and all that. So that's what I've done and trying to keep. So when I saw this in the paper, I don't know what attracted me to it, but I'm here just to see because I've always been interested in trying to help.
Great. We're welcome to have you. And I know that Gibble has a well-hidden secret at the very end of the presentation today about all the different kinds of things people can do to help. And Tim is the one that has really been the driver behind the whole Keys Coalition. And if you'd like to tell us a little about yourself, Tim.
Well, just that I became interested in trafficking and watching the movie Amazing Grace about the story of William Wilberforce. they were then talking about, we saw some things about trafficking and sex tourism, primarily in third world countries. But it was about a year and a half ago that I got reinterested in discovering what a problem it is in the United States. And of course, as the speakers will indicate, Florida is usually ranked as one of the 3 top states in the nation for human trafficking. So we thought it would be worthwhile to put together an organization in Monroe County to address the issue. Not that it's necessarily prevalent in Monroe County, but you know, our goal is to keep it out of here because just one trafficking victim is one too many.
And I will go out on the limb to say yes, there have been victims in Monroe County, but a lot of the victims that have been here have been sent from Miami-Dade down here to be in our children's shelter, because when a child is found to be in that kind of a situation, they take them a county away from where they found them. So, and I don't know whether it's fortunate or unfortunate, but earlier this year the word got out, you know, we have the problem in the Keys, and it wasn't really Keys kids, it was children that, again, have been brought down. When we talked to Barbara Martinez, she's the, Barbara's title is
Federal prosecutor.
Federal
Assistant
prosecutor.
U.S. attorney.
U.S. attorney. She gave the last presentation here in July. And one of the things we learned from her is that when a county really gets strong, and they talk about a county, when a county really gets strong on the issue of trafficking, what they're finding out is that the traffickers are moving to the surrounding counties. So Miami-Dade right now isn't experiencing as much of a problem, but there's been a really upswell up around Broward County.
Broward is pretty screwed.
Broward, they've really had problems where it's really moved into there, and a lot of people think, oh, well, Broward's a really wealthy community, you wouldn't have a problem up there. But it's actually gotten a lot worse. And one of the stories I've heard is that there was someone in our children's shelter down here was kind of coerced by another person that was at the children's shelter that had been sent from Miami-Dade and then went back up there. So, you know, we really do want to do everything we can to help prevent it. So that's why I'm here. And I've known some people that have been personally involved in this issue. So it means a lot to me to see if we can do something. Just a little bit about Greg, our keynote speaker. He's been with the South Miami Police Department for almost 30 years, right? 25 years, and he's been in law enforcement for almost 40. He works with DCF and he works with the courts, and he assists in missing children and juveniles. The presentation that he's giving today is like a 3.5-hour presentation. I had the opportunity to be able to attend it down in, it used to be Tavernier, it's Isla Mirada now, to attend it down there. And it's a terrific presentation because of the fact that there were probably 6 different agencies and organizations that went together to develop this training because of everything that they know. So it isn't just a little single entity here that's gone out to create this. It's been put together by a lot of experts in a lot of different organizations, including Guardian Ad Litem. Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office, I think they've asked for input from Monroe County. Greg could tell you the other organizations that have been involved. So you're getting training here that would probably be worth. Greg has also had the opportunity to bring over $1 million in the Miami-Dade Asset Forfeiture Fund. So he's had some interesting things like that, as well as working in internal affairs investigations. So that's where we'll be seeing you on TV, right? One of the TV shows.
One of the things I will not do is reality television.
Oh,
I live too much of it to put it on TV.
He's done, you know, he's been involved with a lot of.
Thank you for the gracious introduction. Those of you who've seen me speak, you know that this is the last thing in the world I use. I'm all over the place. Some of you have been to the presentations and have heard some of this, so it's kind of a rerun or a refresher, however you want to look at it. But I think it's important, before we talk about indicators, is to put everything in perspective. And so I usually present, when I usually present this, I say, what images and words come to mind when I say teen prostitute? And just, come on,
Just a
give
girl
me
on the
feedback.
street.
Girl on the street.
Runaway.
Runaway, absolutely. Drug addicts. Abuse, absolutely, absolutely. What I never ever get, and I know a couple of you are ringers and are holding back on this, and I appreciate that, but what I almost never ever get, in fact, out of all the presentations I've done, it's probably upwards of 40 or 50, I think it's happened 3 times, I don't get the word victim. That is the word that when we do the presentation, whether it's a half hour or 3 hours, whatever, when you leave, if you don't leave with anything else, please leave with the word victim when you see our children who are in this situation. That's incredibly important. We need to change that thought process in the entire community. Obviously, this is a crime for which there is some type of compensation, otherwise it would not be commercially sexually exploited children. CSEC, I'm going to use CSEC. CSEC, that stands for Commercially Sexually Exploited Children. But it'll be an hour and a half presentation if I say that every time, so it's CSEC. Obviously, there's compensation involved with trafficking. So let's take a couple guesses of what the compensation might be. Money.
Food.
Food.
Money for food.
Money for food, or
If
just
the
money.
child's a runaway,
Right.
then they need the basics, and that's what
Right.
someone will be offering them.
Okay, let's go beyond that now. You're absolutely right. Let's go beyond that. What else?
Shelter.
Shelter. Very important. Very important. Bottom line, anything of value. It can be food, it can be clothing, it can be shelter, it can be a haircut, it could be anything. Anything. Once you do that, you're into the trafficking. I'm going to read the definition because I always read the definition. It's incredibly boring, but I'm going to do it anyway. Under the TVPA, which is the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, that's the federal statute. The recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of an adult for labor, services, or sexual exploitation through the use of force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose of financial or personal gain, i.e. cash favors, drugs, or rent, etc. Please note that for child sexual exploitation, there does not have to be force, fraud, or coercion. Very important. If it's a child victim, there does not have to be force, fraud, or coercion. This comes into play when you have pimps, the exploiters, who promise them whatever. They promise them a house, they promise them a car, they promise them hair, they promise them nails, whatever they promise them. That's not coercion. As I'll speak a little bit later, many times our victims think that they're in love with their exploiter, and the exploiter's in love with them. Nothing could be further from the truth. They're a money-making machine, and that's all they are. And they, deep down inside, sometimes they realize it, sometimes not.
And when you start,
You don't need force, fraud, or coercion. Those 3 things. You do not need to show force, fraud, or coercion. With an adult, you have those elements. Those are necessary elements. With a child, it's automatically assumed. That's the best way to put it. Correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, let me just say that Ben is sitting here. Ben Guerrero he is now handling human trafficking for Miami-Dade and Monroe counties for DCF. And he will be easing into my position because I am leaving no later than October of next year. Our boss I speak very highly of him. He was sharp enough to realize that, you know what, this is a really important situation. We need to do something about this. So they brought Ben in. He started off with human trafficking. It's nothing like jumping in the deep end. It's way beyond the deep end. It's like jumping in the ocean from the 5th floor of a cruise ship. It's really hit him hard, but he's having a good time. Ben has 29 years of law enforcement experience with Miami-Dade Police Department. He is an attorney. He's worked with our child legal services. So he's got a great, well-rounded background. He's going to do fantastic. We're already having a good time with what we're doing, and I have to say this because it'll embarrass the heck out of him, but between the 2 of us, we have 67 years in law enforcement. Jesus Christ. 67 years, long time. So,
that's older than any of us in the whole world.
Well, yeah, it's even older than me. Anyway, some quick stats so you understand why, as Vicki alluded to, why this is an issue. Worldwide, there are 27 million victims of human trafficking. 2.5 million are in the United States. 2.5 million in our country. 18,500 to 20,000 new victims are brought to the United States annually. Annually. 600,000 to 800,000 victims are trafficked annually worldwide. 56% of the victims are women and children. And this is where we get embarrassed for our country. Outside of the United States, on an international level, 16% of the women and children who are trafficked are used in the sex industry. In the United States, 83% are used in the sex industry. And no, Greg is not making those up. That is from the FCAHT website. The national statistics, the U.S. national statistics are 1.5 to 2 million kids will go missing this year. Now, thankfully, the vast majority are recovered. That's the good news. The not so good news, 5,000 will die. That's a lot of children. 70% are victims of crime or will commit a crime while missing. 70%. And 1/3 of all runaways are recruited into the sex industry after 48 hours on the street. So, I think you said runaway? Somebody said runaway. Runaway, okay? Boy, we run the money, huh? Look at that. And that's from the Claus Kids Foundation. According to Estes and Wiener in 2001, between 100,000 and 300,000 American children are in danger of exploitation every year. According to their study, Estes and Wiener, 2001, between 100,000 and 300,000 children, U.S. children. Now understand that we're talking about children who are born and raised in the U.S. We're not talking about 50 or 100 people shoved into a cargo container and shipped over here from somewhere else. We're talking about American children who are plucked off the streets.
And that's new every year? New every year?
That's the risk per year.
300,000.
Okay. Vicki, Tim, do not answer this because you know this already. Okay. The average age of entry into prostitution for a child?
Probably 11.
Very good. You're not right, but you're incredibly close. I usually get 14 and 15 and 16 is 12. You're absolutely very good. You've been studying behind our backs here?
No,
Okay.
I've done a lot of studying.
National Center has done a couple of recent studies and they boosted it all the way up to 13. But 13, if you think about it, that's an average. If it's an average, what do we have? 50% each way, right? So you're talking about children 8 years old to balance out that average, as well as 16-year-olds. You're talking about kids 8 years old. Now, I had 2 boys, but I'll tell you right now, I remember when they were 8, 9, 10 years old, I couldn't get them to get out of bed, I couldn't get them to get dressed. They had a tough time deciding whether or not they even wanted to go to school until Dad, said, come on, we're going. So I really don't picture that same child, be it male or female. And we talk about mostly females because about 95, 96% of the victims are female. That's why I keep saying she. But you really don't picture those same children getting up and saying, I want to sleep with 15 men tonight and give the money to someone else. And yet that's what happened. That's exploitation. It's a lucrative industry because it yields between $32 to $34 billion a year. And it's going up because in 2004 that was estimated at $9 to $12 billion. After drug trafficking, it is tied with arms trafficking as the largest and most lucrative criminal enterprise in the globe. I said after drug trafficking is tied with arms trafficking as the most lucrative criminal enterprise in the world. And unlike drugs and arms, what happens? If I'm a drug dealer and I sell drugs, do I have the drugs anymore? They're gone. If I have a gun and I'm selling the gun, do I have it anymore? It's gone. But if I have a girl and I sell her, I pick her back and sell her again and again and again and again and again. That's why it's so lucrative. I'm going to give you, I know that Vicki wants me to talk about identifying victims, and I'm going to do that, I just want to give you some ideas as to what minor sex trafficking can be. We've already hit on an exchange, sex with an adult in exchange for a place to live or food. And most of these that I'm about to say, we have had cases of. A pimp prostituting an adolescent, which is obvious. A father trading his underage daughter for crack. We haven't had one of those, but we did have a mother do that. A mother allowing her landlord to have sex with her child as rent payment. That's human trafficking, with mom as the offender. 15-year-olds trading a sex act with an adult for money. Those are the obvious ones. A nightclub owner providing shelter and food for minors in exchange for dancing. It happens. It happens a lot. We see it a lot in Miami. I don't know about the few clubs that you have here. I don't know if you run into stuff like that here. I'm very familiar with what goes on in the clubs in Miami. When I was with South Miami, I had to do a study on the clubs because they were trying to open one in South Miami, which they ultimately did. But we really made their life miserable. And it really is, as clubs go, it's a pretty clean operation. But anyway, we're going to get into the identification of victims, and before I do, I'm going to warn everybody, this is one of those doors that you can't close much open. So, I say that only because I had somebody come up to me one time, and they said to me, you know, I really wish I hadn't heard all this, because now I really, really am feeling uncomfortable. So I give you that, I know nobody's running for the door, but I give you that little disclaimer so that nobody comes to me afterward and hits me with a cup or anything. Physical and sexual violence are the everyday reality of many sexually exploited children and may leave visible signs of abuse, such as bruises, scratches, cuts, marks. So if you're, let's use teachers. There's no teachers here, are there? Okay, so I forgot teachers from that. I'm not picking on them, actually. But a teacher who's observing a child every day, and a child comes in with a bruise, or a child comes in and there's a scratch mark on their neck, something's going on, right? In law enforcement, we would call that a clue, that there's something going on. Now, a teacher, and I'm not picking on teachers simply because I know we've had so many reports where they do explore this. And we do get a lot of our hotline reports on everything, not just on physical abuse, sexual abuse, everything come from teachers. They're really good about it. But that's going to be a trigger. That's going to be one of those, you know what, I need to look beyond this. More than likely, they're not going to get a straight story. Child's not going to sit there and say, oh, well, yeah, my pimp beat me up. They're not going to say that. They're going to say, well, I tripped, I fell. The next step is to look and say, is that consistent? Is that consistent? If there's a gash like this and they say, well, I fell, red flag, red flag. Bruises, black eyes, big time. We don't see it as much as we used to because there used to be the phenomenon called guerrilla pimps. And these were the guys who would just beat the hell out of them all the time. Beat, 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 beat. Only way to keep them in line. Beat those girls, beat those girls, beat those girls, not get out there and work. What happened was, and this is going to sound cold, but it's true, they were damaging the merchandise. If you ever go to the store and shop scratch and dent sale, it's discounted, right? Okay. If you've got a child who is a victim and they're damaged, they're going to be discounted? No, you want to make as much money as possible, so you're not going to do that damage. Victims will have fear, anxiety, depression. Why? They're not living the life they want to live. They're not living a normal life. They're living a horrible life. They're being exploited over and over and over. So they're going to have all those terrible feelings. Fear, anxiety, depression, submission. Submission is huge, you know. A true victim will not look anybody in the eye. But they will especially not look a male in the eye because it's disrespectful. They're taught they cannot look their exploiter in the eye. It's disrespectful, so they will have a hard time making eye contact with you and talking to you. Even if they're, let's say, Shelley, let's say they're in your facility and they're in a really secure environment, they're still going to have a tough time looking at you. They're going to look like this. They're going to be like this. They'll be fidgety. They can't make eye contact because You know, I heard somebody explain it to me one time, and you know, don't hold me to this like any type of therapeutic value, what I'm about to say, but they said they're afraid that you will see inside. Somebody said that to me, and they were a therapist, and it kind of stuck with me. So I don't know what, I'm not a therapist, I can't present that as such, but it stuck with me. They're afraid you'll see inside them. And that meant a lot to me. There's a lot of hypervigilance, a lot of paranoia. Hypervigilance because they are in fact scared. They're scared to death because that exploiter can be 100 miles away. That exploiter, I read a story one time of an exploiter who was controlling her by letters. And I think we showed you examples of that, I'm not sure, but it's a letter. Oh baby, I miss you, I wish this, I wish I was there with our baby, da 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 da. Controlling her from prison. From prison by letters. The hold was so strong. Sexually exploited children and youth will sometimes, it says often on here, but sometimes they will show an interest in older men. If you have a 13-year-old who has a really keen interest in older men, in general, I'm not talking about their dad or their uncle or their cousin, I'm talking about walking down the street and they're just looking for men, older men. Strange, strange, if they're showing an interest in them. If there's any type of evidence of a controlling or dominating relationship, that's also a huge clue. The exploiter will want to keep constant control and get them to the mindset where that control is always. Hence the letters from jail controlling a child who really, really, really is totally separated from them. Maybe by hundreds of miles, rather, who knows? And they're still controlling them that way. The phone calls, they will get them a phone. If you ever have contact with a child who has no money or they're living on the street and suddenly they show up with a nice new phone, again, what we in law enforcement would call a clue. There's something there. Where did they get a phone? If you don't have money to eat, you don't have money for shelter, where do you get money for a phone? Did somebody give it to them? Well, I'm not going to say grab the phone and look at it, but I'm going to say that is a clue. That's an indicator because the exploiter has to have contact with his person, with his merchandise, because that is his merchandise. He has to be able to access it and sell it immediately upon demand. Because this is a commodity. This is no longer a child to him. This is a commodity. He created it. Shopping trips, clothing, jewelry, the cell phone we talked about. If you're the exploiter, what do you want your girl to look like? Do you want her to be ragged and dirty and unkempt and wearing, clothes that are torn up? No. Why? Come on, anybody?
Less money.
Less money. Packaging. You're marketing. You're an exploiter. You're marketing a product. You've created a product. You're marketing it. Marketing means that you're going to wrap it up in a beautiful package and present it. You're going to get top dollar. Going back to the scratch and dent sale. If the box is torn, you're going to get less money than a brand new box that's sealed, right? So you're going to dress them up. You're going to get their hair done, your nails done. It's an investment. They don't look at it as doing something nice for their girl. They look at it as an investment in their manufacturing process. So when you have a girl who's having a tough time, you know that the money is not really there for the family, and suddenly she's got beautiful hair, nails are great, looks fantastic, new clothes. Again, what we would call a clue. Now, everything I'm saying up to now and everything else I'm going to present doesn't mean it's an absolute. You may have a child who just comes across, suddenly they lucked out. Maybe Vicki was really kind, saw this poor child wearing the same clothes 3 days in a row, and Vicki's got something in her closet or belongs to one of her kids, and she says, you know what, here, take this. So suddenly, it doesn't mean for sure. It's just a clue. You have to take the totality of circumstance, put it together. There are a lot of wonderful people out there who will see and give a helping hand. So we need to always be aware that these are nothing more than indicators. It's a reason to dig deeper. There is slang, though, that I will tell you is a pretty good indicator. Slang number one is daddy. You get a 16-year-old who's calling some guy who's not related to her daddy, that's what we call a big clue. If they refer to what they're doing as the life, there's a whole language here. There's a whole language. I'll give you a couple of key things, but the life means the life of on the street as a prostitute, being exploited. And if you notice, I don't use the word prostitute too much because I really don't like it, but it's an ugly label, but we're using it here and there. These are exploited children who are also
Victims.
Thank you. Just checking to see if I'm still here. They'll be very secret about their whereabouts. They'll sneak out. When you have a 13-year-old girl who goes out the window of her house at 11 o'clock at night and doesn't come back till 7 o'clock the next morning, I think there's something going on. What do y'all think? More than likely, it's either bad behavior, maybe they're going out and messing with drugs or messing with boys and drinking and everything like that, or maybe they are in fact being exploited. Something to take into consideration. Another term which I will hit on because I will tell you the story of why I'm hitting on it is couch surfing. Couch surfing is bouncing around from couch to couch, just like it sounds, because you don't have a place to live and you need it, and the child may exchange sex for that. And I tell this story to you because we were down here, it's been about a year and a half now. Your newly defeated state attorney, Dennis Ward, invited us down to meet with some people from the school board. And we met with the school board, we did the presentation, we went through all the issues they had to discuss and everything, which is not important right now, but stepped outside and one of these school counselors came up to me and we were chatting. And she says, well, you know, I mean, the kids do this, and she says, you know, and they're out there couch surfing. And I said, whoa, time out. Because I had never heard that phrase before I started doing this. I said, where did you hear that? She said, what? And I said, couch surfing. Where did you pick that up? And she said, oh, from one of the kids. And I said, let me explain to you why I'm bringing that up. And I explained to her where I had heard that, the context I knew of couch surfing, etc. I said, I'm not saying it's for sure, which I've said on all this stuff, but if you have a child who's referring to what she's doing as couch surfing, you need to maybe look a little harder, dig a little deeper if you have that report. So it's not like these are coming out of the air. There I am at a meeting on something different, and boom, it lands in my lap. Whatever became of it, I don't know. I've never spoken to the lady again. I don't know what happened. But you know what? If nothing was there, God, I'm happier than if there is something there, but we raised the awareness on that. I talked about the late night, the unusual hours. I mean, it really is. Everybody will concur that a 13-year-old going out the window at 11 o'clock and coming back 7 the next morning is not a good thing, right? We're all good with that. Tattoos are huge. Tattoos. Sometimes they're obvious. Daddy across the neck is what we would call a clue. Sometimes they're not as obvious. They might be a little flower. There might be a $sign tattooed. Most common places are neck, breast, thigh. There might be a little $sign. I mean, if we had a projector and if I have some pictures that are incredibly graphic that show just the whole back of the neck, the whole side of the neck, even on the face. Why do they tattoo their girls?
For other people to know that they're,
For sale.
well, not that they're for sale, that they have a boss. And
Yes
trying to
and
get
yes.
them,
You're
you know,
both
right.
right. You're both right. You're 100% right. You're 80% right. And I say that because they brand them just like they brand Cap. That's their stable. They're in their stable. What does an exploiter call his group? A stable. Okay? There's no other way around it. That's one of the lingos you'll hear. If a girl ever says, you know, well, she's over in the stable, guess what? That goes beyond the clue. That's like a key indicator. Okay? We're really on the money then. So they brand them. They'll brand them all over the place. Like I said, I ride public transport when I go down to work in downtown Miami because I live in the south part of Dade, and the traffic is horrendous, as anybody who's ever gone to Dade County knows. And so I take the train to and from. It's a 17-minute ride. Almost every week I see at least one girl, sometimes underage, sometimes 20s, early 20s, with a daddy tattoo, or a daddy's little girl, or somebody's name on their body. And they haven't gotten to the point, maybe they're in the life yet, or maybe not, but they haven't gotten to the point where they cover it up. See, once I think they're out, I would think, and I'm only guessing on this one, once they're out of the life, I would think they'd want to cover that. And in fact, there's been an effort in Tampa Bay. There's a gentleman who's donating his time to do tattoo removal for victims coming out. And it's a wonderful thing, because some of these tattoos are horrendous. I mean, if a girl is coming out of the life and is trying to start over and trying to create a wonderful life, how do you do that when you've got a dollar sign on your neck? Plus, every time she looks in the mirror, what does she think? So I think he's doing a wonderful thing, and I'm sure that others will follow. And it's a great thing to remove those tattoos. Any questions on anything? I mean, I'm just like rattling along here. No? Okay, we're good. Clothing can be an issue. Now, I still have a pulse, therefore I see what goes on. Some of the girls dress very provocatively. I mean, if it were my kid and they're 13 years old, they would not be dressing that way, but who am I to judge? But I will say that when you find a 13 or a 14-year-old out on the street at 11 o'clock at night dressed in something incredibly short and incredibly low cut and hair and makeup make them look like they're 18, 20 years old, I would say that's a red flag. Not so much when they're with their parents, but if they're out by themselves or with a group of girls or with a couple of girls and they're all dressed like that, to me, that would be something that I would explore more as a law enforcement officer. I would kind of get a little curious as to why are you out here, what are you doing? Not in a confrontational way, not in a nasty way, but I would absolutely show some interest, and not in the way they might want. But remember, the clothing and hair, nails, all that, in and of itself is not the indicator that says, oh my gosh, she is a victim. These are all little building blocks. And the more of these blocks that you find, you'll see the more you can build a case either one way or the other. If you have a girl with a short skirt and nothing else, you probably don't have anything. If you've got a girl with a couple of indicators, you probably don't have anything, and it starts to build from there. But if you find somebody with a tattoo, hair, nails, makeup, short skirt, low-cut top, 13 years old, on the street at 11 o'clock, I would say you've got every indicator you need to call a sheriff's office or call somebody and say, I think that this is going on. And I will tell you, I will speak very highly of the Monroe County Sheriff's Office because I like them, we work well together, and you call them, I firmly in my heart believe they're going to come and they're going to handle it right. I believe that. If you do encounter a victim, and I do a little street theater, but I'm not going to do it here with this smaller audience, but when I do the presentation with Alejandra, I bring her up there and I say, okay, what's your name? Where are you from? No. Now you are Maria, you're 19 years old, here's your new date of birth, and this is where you're from. And the first thing I will say is, now go over to that police car and get arrested. Why? You know, Ray, don't say anything. Neither you. Why? Okay.
Once you got a criminal record, they kind of got you.
I just took her and I took this 14-year-old girl.
Yeah.
I gave her a new identity, got her arrested, got her fingerprinted pictures, everything. She's in the system. As an adult. Now I don't have to worry about the fact that she's 14. Because guess what? Next time she gets picked up, okay? And you know what else happens? Ready for this one? This is the really, really ugly one. If they're a juvenile, I'll tell you what goes on in Miami-Dade, and it goes on in the Keys too. If they're a juvenile, they go down to the Juvenile Assessment Center. And they will probably wind up being held until they're transferred to the DJJ facility and then have to go before a judge. If they're registered as an adult in the system, I go down and I pay $50. Standard bond, $500, 10%, $50, and she's out and back on the street, and I look at her and say, now, get to work and make me my $50 back. So we do that. She's now arrested every single time. And you know, once that's in the system, it is murder to get it out. You can seal, you can expunge, you can do all this stuff, but I'll tell you what, it's still around. It's really tough to get straightened out. That's why people with identity theft have such a tough, terrible time, because once that happens, and it's gone to 85 different places, it's murder to straighten out.
Is it hard on the girl, or you mean because she can be charged with identity theft, or?
No, I'm using identity theft as an example of why it's once somebody's identity has been compromised. I'm talking about, skip the CSEC for a minute, but just, let's say in a tax fraud case, somebody's identity has been stolen and a fraudulent tax return is filed. Sometimes it takes 1.5 years for the people to even get their stuff straightened out with the IRS. In the interim, it's already screwed up their credit reports. My point being is that once you're in that system as an adult, it is nearly impossible to get that child unadulted in that system, because it's the Florida Crime Information Centers, the National Crime Information Centers, the FBI. It's everybody in the world has that information. The prints, the picture, the arrest record, everything is everywhere. You can go online and find the arrest record. You can go online and find the arrest record, and the child might be 14 years old, but they gave it false information and they're listed as an adult. And until that's actually purged from every single database, it's just out there. They're stuck. It's out there. And that's one of the first things that an exploiter will do, is establish a fake identity. And they will tell the kids, they will tell their child, first thing, I'm going to back up for a minute and go through a quick pimpology thing here. And I don't like pimps, and everybody who's seen me present knows I don't like pimps, but what they'll do is they might snatch them off the street in Detroit. They'll bring 4 girls, take them down to Atlanta. Atlanta's a hub. For whatever reason, it's a hub. You might keep 2, sell 1, and give 1 away, or kick her out the door, or whatever be the case. But you know what? They're not going to run away. You know why they're not going to run away? They're 1,000 miles from home. They're 1,000 miles from home. They don't know anybody. Their identification's been taken by him. They have no money. He's brainwashed them for 1,000 miles, telling them that, you know what? Cops don't care about you. They're just going to take you back to your home. Chances are their home wasn't great. Very rarely are there, like, off-the-street kidnappings of a happy child. The pimps are like really good actors. They feed off of what the girl says. And we could probably do 4 hours just on pimps and pimpology, but we're not going to do that. But they brainwash them. They change their whole perception of themselves and their lives. And they convince them they're the only person that's going to take care of them. So by the time they get to Atlanta, they don't want to go back to an abusive home, because sex abuse is prevalent in about 80%, was it 80% I think of the victims have had sexual abuse in their lives. Okay? So they don't want to go back to abusive life. Their parents don't care, according to the pimp. I mean, otherwise, wouldn't they have already found you? Wouldn't they already be after you? Law enforcement, no, they're just going to throw you guys in jail. They're just going to put you in jail. They don't care. You can't go to the cops. Where does the child go? This is the only person they know 1,000 miles or 500 miles or 400 miles from home, and the only other people that you're associating with are other teen victims. A pimp and maybe his top girl, which is called a bottom girl, who really runs the stable. So they're stuck. So their identity is essentially gone. So it's whatever the exploiter gives them. And that's why, especially for law enforcement investigators, when they encounter one of these children, she may be Maria, who's 18 one day, and 2 hours later or 3 hours later in the conversation, she's now Maria Elena, who's 19, and it just goes, because you know what, they're kids. They don't keep that story that straight. They're just kids. They're not hardened criminals. They're kids who've had a really, really horrible thing happen to them. It's really important, if you have a child she says, I'm from St. Louis. I mean, let's say we're in Key West, and law enforcement or somebody encounters a child and they say they're from St. Louis. Really? And they ask for identification. They have no identification at all. I mean, my sons, from the time they were about 13 years old, carried something with them at all times. Even around the house, I mean, even around the neighborhood, they had something. I mean, they didn't have a driver's license, thank God. But they had some type of idea, something that showed who they were, who they belonged to, and who to call if there was an issue. Unfortunately, they still call me, and they're old now. Red flags. These are the real red flags that you might run into in the Keys. Excess amounts of cash. If you got a young child, girl, 13, 14, 15 years old, is suddenly carrying a bunch of money, not all of our children who are being exploited are with pimps. There might be other exchanges, or on occasion, you may find a child who's actually an independent contractor, just out there on their own. Figured it's a great way to make money. So if they got a lot of cash, that's a clue. Since we are tourist driven down here, hotel room keys are really huge. If I were a law enforcement officer and I stopped a child, 14-year-old, 15-year-old child, who had 6 hotel room keys, that would kind of be a red flag. If y'all encounter, maybe in a shelter you might encounter a child, the child's got a bunch of cards for different hotels, that would be a gigantic red flag for me. And you may have not ever seen that, and maybe you have. I'm not putting you on the spot. I mean, maybe you have, maybe not, but that would be huge. I don't see where the ordinary person, like if Vicky's on the street and she sees something that's a little, I don't see where you're going to see where she has a bunch of hotel keys, unless she drops them or something like that. But you may run into them, Shelly, at the shelter. Something to be able to look out for. And it's not just kids. Remember, if you get a lady in there who's 21 years old and has 6 or 8 hotel keys, you know what you got too. If you're brought here from somewhere else, and it can be Miami down to Key West. If you have somebody who is totally unfamiliar with their whereabouts, and I'll tell you again, I like telling stories because this is firsthand and this is true. This happened to me, and it was in Key West, and it was 3 years ago, and I'm on Duval Street, and I'm with the person who was at that time our statewide human trafficking coordinator. We were down and presenting. And we're on the street, and I stopped at one of the cigar kiosks, and I figured I'd treat myself to my once every 3-month cigar. And I was chatting with a young lady who had an Eastern European accent, I could tell. And I said, "Where are you from?" And she told me where she was from. I said, "You're in Key West. How did you get here?" And she said, "Airplane." Now, if I ask, I'm going to pick on you now. If I ask you, I say, "How'd you get here?" You're going to say, "Oh, we came down for a weekend," or "We drove here," or if you're working here, you're going to say, "No, I saw this job opportunity." Even if your English is not that great, you're not going to say airplane. So I immediately grabbed our coordinator, who's already like, ready to go. I said, "Just let it go for a minute, let it go for a minute." We walked away. Guy came out of the store. The other girl at the other kiosk comes over, and the 3 of them are talking. Right there, we know what we had, okay? This is labor trafficking. This is not sex trafficking. This was labor trafficking. But more than likely, they were brought over here with a promise of something else. A promise of either a good career or an education or all the above. And you won't be working hard. You won't be working long hours. You'll make so much money. And now what? They're in a kiosk for 80 hours a week? And what are they making? I'm not saying that everybody down there is being exploited. Trust me on that one, okay? I'm sure there's plenty of legitimate business. However, there is the opportunity for questionable behavior. And that's all I'm saying. I'm not pointing a finger. I'm not criticizing anybody. I'm just saying there is opportunity. Anywhere you have tourism, you have opportunity. We talked about eye contact, physical abuse, scripted communications, travel to other cities. No teachers here, unfortunately, because unexplained absences are huge. A child suddenly disappears for a week from school and then comes back, especially if they come back like with the hair done, the nails done, like we're talking about. That is a huge indicator. Children should not be leaving school for extended periods. I'm a parent. Most of y'all have been parents. Most of y'all grew up Did your parents ever take you out of school for 2 or 3 weeks to go on vacation in the middle of the school year? No. Again, we have our runaways and our missing kids, especially the ones who are CSEC suspect or verified, will be out of school, what, 30, 40, 50 days? They'll miss 30, 40, 50 days of school. Obviously an indicator. Obviously something that needs to be picked up. So excessive absences from school is a huge indicator, because responsible parents will not take their kids out for an extended period in the middle of the school year, because they're going to fail, and you don't want your children to fail. Then, of course, Tim's favorite subject, the internet. If they have some type of sexually explicit profile on the internet, either on on Facebook or somewhere like that, Black Planet is another one. Anything sexually explicit, well, that's going to be huge.
What is Black Planet?
Black Planet it's a predominantly African American site, which is very similar to Craigslist and Facebook, etc. And it's just another site where kids go on, children go on, and of course, therefore, exploiters. Now, here's a really easy clue. If they have a back page advertisement where they're advertising themselves, it's really easy to conclude that they're being exploited. That's like a no-brainer, okay? For those of you who don't know, does anybody not know what Backpage is? And don't be afraid. Okay, Backpage it is an online as well as a print medium. Backpage.com, which you can go look at if you'd like. It's an alternative news and information site. It is owned by the Village Voice, Tim's buddies. The Village Voice, out of New York, they have, I think, 17 publications?
Yes.
17 publications, including in Miami. I'm sorry? Miami New Times, obviously the Village Voice, the original publication, etc. But this is their online presence. And you can pretty much find any fetish and anything you want, including plenty of underage girls on Backpage.com. Plenty of them. If you know a child who has something on Backpage, I won't even go so far as to say that's a clue. That's an absolute. Nobody advertises on Backpage for anything other than nefarious reasons, unless they're trying to sell a dog or something. But if you find a child on there, and we have investigators, meaning law enforcement has investigators who do in fact prowl Backpage, looking for exploited children. I know personally of one case up in Pensacola, where I think it was an Escambia County Sheriff's Sergeant, Detective Sergeant was trolling for looking for one of DCF missing girls up there and found her on Backpage. And they did a rescue based on her ad. So they do appear, and you've seen the presentation. I've shown you the young lady from Central Florida, and really nice, cute kid, nice picture and everything else. The next slide I show is her picture on Backpage. Her picture in a black dress, low cut, short, and the third picture I show is her up against the wall like this. In a nice sexy pose as she was working, I think. Backpage.
So if she has a new ID, what is it, face recognition that they have ID somebody from the ads?
Well, they have a picture. It's not facial recognition. It's not software like that. But what they do is they troll the ads, and you've got a picture here, and you look. There are certain features that just stay the same. You know, they're not the exploiter's not going to go out and pay for nose jobs. There are certain things that just stay the same. The internet is a. I'm not going to bash the internet, and I'm not going to bash websites. The internet is an interesting place in that it's estimated that 65% of the traffic on the internet is sexual content worldwide. In fact, sure, 65% of the Johns that go on the internet are more responsive if the ads have age descriptors like young, barely legal, attached to them. And that's from A Future Not a Past, the Juvenile Justice Fund. Catherine McCullough is the lady who runs that. So remember, they are trained to lie, They distrust the system, they have fake identification, they have loyalty to the pimp, the exploiter. They have absolute loyalty to that exploiter. That's their lifeline. Frequent movement about the area, or the county, or the country. They might start off in Detroit, go to Chicago, go to Atlanta. Maybe one week in each place. From Atlanta, they might head over to Tampa. Then they might head over to Orlando, Orange Blossom Trail, go to Daytona, come on down here, Palm Beach, Fort Lauderdale, Miami. They could come south. Yes, it is absolutely possible. Could they come south? Thankfully, you don't have much here. Thankfully. It's not like Miami. It's not like Broward. You don't have as much. Could it happen? Absolutely. But it's less likely, thankfully, to happen here because you're a small community. Let's face it, if you extrapolate the tourists and the part of your people, what is there, like 70,000 people in the whole county then? Something like that? I mean, that's a small town. Everybody knows everything. I was told that a long time ago, and it's absolutely true. The victims are in love with their abuser. Most of the time, they have built this relationship. It's an ugly relationship, but they've built this relationship. They're in love with their abuser. They don't feel they are victim. They don't feel they're a victim. They're doing this because, well, we're doing it anyway, so why not get paid for it so that my man will have money? They don't identify as victims. And, Shelley, I'll put you on the spot. If they come into you and they don't believe there's anything wrong, is it going to be harder to work with? I have a great respect for what the young lady does. That's why I have to kind of, because I know it's an uphill battle. Because it's not just people walking and saying, I'm here helping. It's layer after layer after layer.
It's the same with TV. There's just so much brainwashing going on and confusion and just, and I'm sure with such result, it's definitely with trafficking as well.
All right, you got about 45 minutes of the presentation and a half hour, or maybe a little more. I don't know. I don't even keep track of the time. I shouldn't. But anyway, there's a lot more to it. I hope that I'm able to come. I'm invited. I will be happy to do the full presentation to your group, whatever. Any questions at all? Now, Ben's been told he's got to be brief. I'm going to bring him up here just to talk to you for a minute about Safe Harbor, because the Safe Harbor legislation is brand new and it takes effect January 1, and it really is important. He's going to talk to you about Safe Harbor, and then we're going to be out of your hair. But I want to thank you for the opportunity of being here. As always, I'm happy to come down. It's great. I don't care if there's 10 people here or there's 100 people. We give the same presentation because it's something I feel very passionate about.
Just out of curiosity, they indicate that we're going to have more of a problem when there are large events like the presidential, when they came down, and maybe on race weekend, and when there's other big events, like Super Bowl comes to town, I know that there's supposed to be a lot more activity. What does law enforcement do to try to help? And what can we as residents of a tourist area, because now, I could swear one day when I went and got my nails done that there was this young girl that came in and I could just, it just struck me that she, she didn't live here and she came in to get her nails done and she was, dressed in short shorts and stuff like that. And it just really hit me like I couldn't help but wonder if, that might be what had happened to her. But what can we do? Because we know down here that we're going to have those kinds of huge activities that's going to draw people to come to us. So what can we do to try to help at times like that? And what does law enforcement do?
DCF, understand, we're the reactive unit. Not by choice, but we're the reactive unit. We do some proactive stuff, but we have to keep it within our realm, so it's kind of a tight realm. Law enforcement, citizens groups, etc. You can be the proactive group. I would say that maybe you'd want to sit down with somebody from the sheriff's office, and discuss with them and say, hey, here we are available when there are entities coming to town or there are events occurring that you and we feel might bring a less desirable element to town. We'd like to work with you. And see what they say. That's the way I would approach it. Because there's a good thing to eyes and ears and a bad thing to eyes and ears. The good thing is that, yeah, we got more people out there looking. The bad news is, do they know what they're looking for? And y'all, you, Tim, some of the others have seen the full presentation we do. That's the same thing we gave the Sheriff's Department, the State Attorney, I mean to all those folks. So it's not like you're walking in there saying, well, gee, I think, no. You've had some training on this. You have. Discuss with them. They're the ones who are on the front line. The Sheriff's Office, Key West.
And in our community in Key Largo and Avenir, we do have some homeowner associations too. So I think you're right. Maybe if we go to the Sheriff's Office because they work with the homeowner associations from a crime watch perspective, maybe there's something we could do there to help bring a little bit more emphasis or
yeah, but that's your frontline group is your law enforcement community. And like I said, I have nothing but the highest respect for MCSO. I think they're great. And so I would approach them.
Well, and I know they've all gone through training for it. Now, are you moving to the next step? Because I know that you know that you've been doing the training and conducting the training with the Sheriff's Office and, you know, with the Guardian Ad Litem
right.
and other agencies, but are you now starting to expand it into the schools? Is that something that Keys Coalition needs to help you do, or is it something that naturally is going to be happening on your end to be moving the training into the overviews like you're giving us today?
Yeah, it's a good assignment for that.
I heard my name in assignment.
The schools have been approached. You've had a bit of a turnover in administration.
Right. It's the key.
Yes, they were approached. Where we're at on that, I have not followed up on that. They know, I think the right people know that I, or Ben, or Alejandro, or all of us were all available. You've seen all of us, well, you haven't seen him, but you've seen us present. And they know we're available, we've met with them, the ball's in their court. We're not going to go anywhere we're not invited. We're not going to shove ourselves down, you know, and say, you need to do this, you need to do it. No. You need people who are willing and who are accepting. You were explaining to me about somebody who is not accepting and saying there's no problem with Keys, etc. We don't need to mention names. So when they're ready, for whatever reason, maybe they encounter something, they're briefed about something or whatever, when they're ready, they'll come to us. We don't shove ourselves. We got plenty to do. I mean, this is a nice break for us, but we got plenty to do. So we don't say, you know what, we need to do this, we need to do this, we need to do this. No, we don't do that. You want to come to us, we'll absolutely, we're doing presentation, well, he's doing it now, a presentation from Miami-Dade School Board. It'll be about 200, 250, what are they, guidance counselors and administration, yeah, on Friday. He's going to have a ton of those folks in one auditorium. It's going to be fantastic. It's a wonderful opportunity. We were hoping for a couple hours to cut us down to a half hour, so he's doing it by himself. Because if you get both of us up there, it'll never get out.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
We had a house in our neighborhood across this one actually. It filled up with young people, Orientals, no furniture. Most of them had jobs at Winn-Dixie. They would catch the bus and go down. So somebody from our church who lived across the street, oh, they have no furniture, and we got the church together to help them get furniture. But it was odd. And the people who brought them here to get the jobs were no place to be seen. Is something you report to the sheriff's office?
Yeah, you could. You absolutely could. I mean, the worst case scenario, they come out and there's nothing. I used to do, when Crime Watch started in Miami-Dade County, I was with the South Miami Police Department. I was the first presenter for the South Miami Police Department Crime Watch in the early 80s. And I would go and I would tell folks, you know what, two things. Number one, same thing as I said here, I had a presentation for 250 people in an auditorium or 5 people around a kitchen table that got the same presentation because I wanted the information and the word out there. And I would get a question similar to that, and I'm not picking on you for that. That's great. Everybody asks that. And you'll have people say, well, you know, a month and a half ago I saw call us. And da-da-da, call us, call us, call us. The message was call, call, call. Call the police. When in doubt, call, call, call. So I had to go in front of the city commission at the behest of the city manager because our burglary rate went up. Went way up. And everybody was like screaming, what the hell is going on here? What the hell is going on? I said, time out. It's not that we're getting more burglaries. Because you got to look at something else. We were going from like 4% clearance to 20% clearance rate. That's arrests. So we got more reports because the person who left a power tool on their porch and it disappeared the next day, they weren't calling. Now they're calling. The person who left a bicycle inside in an unlocked shed and it's gone, now they're calling. Because all we did was emphasize call, call, call. But what would happen was they'd say, you know what, there's a guy across the street taking a bike out of a shed and he don't live there. Boom, guess what? He got to wear those pretty bracelets. So we did it. The rate went up, arrests went up. So what happened after a while? It started to taper off on both ends. You know why? And Ben was with the county, so he's going to hate what I'm about to say, but I would present and I would say, is there anybody here who thinks we can eradicate crime? And you see like one or two hands like halfway up and they'll be like, I'm not doing that. No, you can't eradicate it. You know what you do? You relocate it. So our goal in South Miami was to move it all into the county so that he had job security. There was no other reason for Ben's job security. No, we would relocate it because you know what? If they start to realize that, oh, crime, if we go to South Miami, there's a big chance we're going to get busted because they're making arrest this, arrest that, and they put it all in the newspaper, so you see all these arrests. Little tiny town of 11,000 people, 2.5 square miles, and they got 15 or felony arrests listed. No, I'm going out to the county where it's not quite as bad. Yeah, I know. You're going to report it later, I know.
And we're getting a lot of that in the Key Largo, Avenue area, a lot more crimes that are those types of crimes, but they're coming down
from Miami.
Yeah, from
I
Miami.
do follow that a bit, and I've noticed, I think there was two separate arrest incidents last week. There were two guys who were arrested for breaking into a closed business, and they were from Miami, and then I think there were three guys who were burglarizing was it a home, I think?
Right.
In Key Largo.
Was that the scrap metal one?
The scrap metal one, yeah.
It was a father and like
Right.
younger and younger.
Right.
17, yeah.
Right. They were from Miami, and then there was also, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, there was a burglary in Key Largo. I think it was a residential burglary, and they caught the guys. 2 of the deputies caught the guys, and they were from Miami as well. So yeah, we're making it rough on them, so they're coming down here. So.
Yeah.
Well, you have a lot of seasonal homes too, where it's easy access.
Right.
And that's
in
where,
Key Largo, I mean, if you take
deviating a
that
bit
around-
from the message, but that's where your eyes and ears of the neighbors.
Right.
And that's what we used to emphasize. Hey, if you know that Vicki lives across the street and you see some guy pull up in a truck and go to the shed and start taking something out, on that phone. We would rather go out 100 times for no reason than to miss the one good one. That's what I would tell people. We'd rather go 100 times for no reason than one time and miss it. All right, I blew through this really quick. I'm going to,
Excellent job.
Thank you. Ben's going to give you about 4 or 5 minutes. You're limited. On Safe Harbor, which is incredibly important legislation that takes effect January 1st. And he'll give you the high points on that.
Excellent.
Yes.
And I know he gets embarrassed, but he does have 29 years with Miami-Dade Police Department, and on top of that, he is an attorney.
Oh, don't hold that. Important thing for all of you, and I strongly feel that this issue is important, but it's important because I think it's a matter that has to be, there needs to be awareness, there needs to be education, community needs to be involved in this situation in order to try to prevent or bring it to somebody's attention so that we can get these young victims services. I think the most important thing is to get them the services that they need so that we can get them off the street and we can get at some point to some place where we can prosecute the exploiters and let them pay for their exploitation of these children. But having said that, in order to be able to get some of these children to be recognized as victims, the legislature passed House Bill 99, which is going to be in effect come January 1st. And really, what the bill does, it addresses several things, and some of it is going to be relevant to you, and a lot of it is not relevant to you, but it's important to know what happens. In the past, these children that were being sexually exploited weren't coming into the dependency system. And the reason they weren't coming into the dependency system is because what happens is a lot of these children, like Greg explained, are chronic runaways. They're involved in this type of situation. They're running away from home. They're leaving the house. And really what's happening is that in the past, as dependency lawyers, we had no way to identify a maltreatment, right? Because in dependency, what we do is we bring a child into dependency if the child's being abused, abandoned, or neglected by a caregiver, parent, whoever it is, that has custody of the child and has a legal responsibility for the child. But if we don't have an abuse, abandonment, or neglect, we don't have a dependency case. That's what we do. We don't do crimes, we don't do anything, we do abuse, abandonment, and neglect. So in the past, we'd go and investigate these cases, and the child would be out in the street. We may have very well gotten information that the child was involved in. At that time, we weren't looking at it as victim children, right? We're looking at them as being involved in a criminal activity, right? Because they're involved in prostitution or whatever it is that they were involved in. And the parent would say, simply would say, look, I don't have any control over my child. You know, you bring her back here, she stays here 2 or 3 days, and then she's gone. I'm not abusing her. I'm not exploiting her. I'm not neglecting her. I'm not doing anything that is an identified maltreatment as the statute requires. So what do we call those children? In the past, we used to call them ungovernable, right? So we would have to find services for them outside of the dependency system, community-based services. In Miami, we'd have the Bridge, we'd have SIP placements if the child had mental health issues and so forth, but really, basically, it was a community thing and it was voluntary because the child was never came into the dependency system going before a judge, having a community-based care provider providing them services or anything of that nature.
No guardian?
No, nothing, because the child was not in our system. Now, that doesn't mean the child was not in the delinquency system. Many of these children were arrested for their activities while they were out on the street, but they weren't dependent children. They were delinquents, right? That's the way we viewed them.
That's the difference.
Right, that's the difference, and that's part of the whole evolution of what we're trying to do. And that is exactly what Greg said at the beginning, is we want to see these children as victims. We don't want to see them as delinquents or criminals, because they are not. They are being used as money-making commodities. So they're being used. They are not being there. And someone mentioned this, and I think Greg mentioned it in passing. No 13-year-old gets up one day and says, "Hey, I want to be a prostitute." I mean, that just doesn't happen. Those children are being exploited, and therefore the trend is we need to evolve and make sure that we call these children exactly what they are, which is a victim and not a delinquent or a criminal. But getting back to the law, what the law has done is it's changed. Number one, it amended the definition of abuse to include sexual exploitation. There was, in the sexual abuse section of the statute, sexual exploitation was not included in that definition. Now, sexual exploitation is included in the sexual abuse section of the statute. So they've amended the definition to include abuse, sexual exploitation. The second thing it did for the dependency part of it is that it says that a child now can be considered dependent by a court if the child is known to be involved in or is known to be a victim of sexual exploitation, and there is no parent or guardian or caregiver that can give that child the appropriate care and supervision they need. So what happens? In the past, when we would go and investigate these cases and a parent would tell us, I can't control my child, I just merely don't have any control over her or him, you bring them to the house, they run away the next day, whatever it is, we'd have nothing. Under the new statute, if the parent can't give that child the adequate and appropriate care and supervision, that child can now be brought into the dependency system. So a parent now can say, I can't care for the child because she just keeps behaving in this manner. Now we can actually take that child, do a petition, go before a judge, and now that child comes into the court as a dependent child. Now we have a little more control over the child because now the child is receiving court-ordered services, their supervision with our case management services that we provide the child. So now the child can get an array of different things that they couldn't get because they were never being able to be brought into the dependency system. That's one of the things the law did. The other thing it did...
So in other words, what you're saying is that even if the child is unmanageable, so to speak, the child could still be at the parent's home and now get help?
It could happen that way.
It
could happen that way. Now the way that we deal with the children, a great portion of it hasn't changed. Okay, the things that have changed are education. Education as to what services these children need. So now the court requires, or the law requires, that we assess the children, that we assess them specifically for what their needs are. A lot of them may be on the street. They may have a huge array of needs that in the past weren't being met because we weren't assessing them for that specific group of children, for that population of children. Now the law requires that we assess them specifically for what they need, right? So that they can get the proper services to target their problems. The other thing that the law did is it allowed for the state to create what they call safe houses. Okay? Now, in the past, these children would have to go and be placed, if they couldn't go home because the home environment wasn't safe and they were being taken away from the home, they had to be placed in foster care, they had to be placed in relative placements, whatever it was that a normal dependent child would go to. Now, the state, it's not a requirement, but the state has now allowed for safe houses to be developed. And a safe house is, there's specific criteria for a safe house that these safe houses need to meet in order to be compliant with the statute, right? They're not locked down facilities, but they do need a certain amount of safety requirements. They have to meet safety requirements, cameras, surveillance, safety cameras, in order not only to make sure that people are aware if a child is leaving the facility, but they don't want anybody coming to that facility to threaten these children. A lot of these exploiters, what they're doing is they're going to known places where these children are, foster homes, the bridge, wherever it is that they know that these vulnerable children are being sheltered at. And what they're doing is they're sending people, or they're going themselves to recruit children from these particular places. So they're no longer looking through, like, what was commonly known, you know, you're looking for a runaway child at a bus stop. I mean, that still may happen, but they know where to go look for the kids. They know exactly where these children, where the population of children are located, and they're targeting these locations in order to go and do their recruiting. So the law allows now for safe houses. As far as I know, there is only going to be one safe house that's going to be active starting January 1st when the law comes into effect, and that's at Christie House in Miami-Dade. Miami-Dade, Christie House has teamed up with Project Gold. They've already established the location. They've purchased the location for a safe house. That safe house is going to have 6 beds. the statute allows for a short-term safe house and a long-term safe house. The short-term safe house is for 30 days, a long-term safe house is for up to a year. This particular house that is being run by Christie House and Project Gold is a short-term safe house. So if a child is in need of an immediate shelter placement, they can bring that child, if that child meets the criteria, to that safe house. And that child can stay there for up to 30 days. Now, what's the criteria? The criteria is, number one, that the child is in fact identified as a child that's been sexually exploited, that the child is not suffering from things that make her or eliminate her or him from being able to be placed in a safe house. In other words, they're not known as a recruiter, they don't have suicidal ideations, certain things that you don't want to bring a child in contact with other children that are suffering from some of the very same things, that is going to create more of a detriment to everybody than it is to just keep that child safe. So that child may have to go someplace else, but that would be done the way DCF and our partners normally do it. Chase staff, and they find out what is the best placement for that child at the time. None of this, by the way, none of these mandates have been funded by the government. So these are all things that have been now established through community partnerships, donations, those kinds of things. This is an unfunded mandate. We do have statutorily a requirement to report to the legislature every year about certain statistics and data that are related to these safe houses, which is how many children have been brought into the system or are known to be human trafficking children or identified as human trafficking children, how many children have been assessed for human trafficking, how many children have met the criteria to be placed in a safe house, how many children were placed in a safe house, and how many children met the criteria to be placed in a safe house but were not placed because there was not one available. Okay? And really basically what this is going to compile statistics and data that I think at some point, if the state starts providing funding for these safe houses, I believe that they're going to fund these houses in a way that is mostly with supply and demand, like they do everything else. How many places had a lot of HT children identified, and how many places couldn't put a child in a safe house because they just didn't have the resources. So we want to fund those places if there's a lot of identified children that need it but just couldn't get that kind of service. That has yet to happen. Right now, there's no money for that. Now, there are, at least in Miami-Dade County, we do have the possibility of his house opening a long-term safe house. And I believe they already have a facility in place. They have already gotten a certain amount of funding for that facility. And that long-term safe house, I believe, is also going to start with 6 beds.
Who's behind that?
I mean, that's really terrific that they're going to be able to open up two.
But the problem is that although Miami-Dade has, and Greg can tell you, in the past 2 weeks, I think we've had 6 cases of human trafficking come to our attention. In the past 2 weeks. So, I mean, for us, when I first got here to do, I came from Children's Legal Services where I was doing legal work. And then I came here as a human trafficking coordinator in expectations that Greg at some point obviously would be leaving so that we can make that transition. When I got here, we had, I believe at the time, during the year, maybe between 40 and 50, somewhere in that area, children that when the calls came into intake, they were classified as human trafficking cases. Now, out of those children, many of those cases ended up that the human trafficking element might have been unfounded, right? Because at some point, somebody may make a call and
say, look, this child may be involved in human trafficking, and at some point when the investigator goes out and conducts their investigation, they find out that in fact, really what somebody believed was human trafficking may not have been human trafficking or didn't rise to the level. So even though it's classified as human trafficking, at the end of the day, once the investigation is done, that is not founded, and that goes into our data system so that we can keep track of which ones are in fact valid human trafficking cases and which ones really came in, but at the end of the day we found out that through investigations they were not.
So was that like 40 or 50 for an entire year?
That was for a 6-month period, right? But now what's happened is the following.
That was just Miami-Dade though, right?
That's just Miami-Dade. Now, what I believe the whole state last year had 100, about 100, they said. That's throughout the state of identified or classified human trafficking victim cases that were called into the hotline and were classified as human trafficking.
But this is just that DCF would be involved in, or just total?
That's just what we have been involved in, DCF, okay? Now, the issue with this is going to be that awareness is going to make these numbers grow, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because at some point, the more you're aware that these things are happening, the more calls you're going to get that are going to come in with people making allegations that these children are victims of human trafficking. And stop it because we're doing the right thing in providing services and trying to mitigate these cases. At some point, I'm hoping that would start. The awareness makes the numbers go up, and then our efforts make the numbers go down, which is what we're looking for.
Well, with the numbers that Craig talked about, 100,000 to 300,000 cases suspected in the United States per year, that would be saying that the majority of, I mean, because if you just consider Florida with only 100, I'm not trying to make light of it at all.
Well,
please,
those are at-risk youth. Those aren't actual cases. The 100,000 to 300,000 are the estimates from the National Center for Missing Exploited Children is the number of children at risk.
Okay.
Yeah, those are not actual cases.
Okay.
And remember that some of these cases are being investigated by the federal agencies, right? Because what we're dealing with a lot here is our local population. Sometimes we do get cases called in of a child that's come in through the airport and they're unattended and they believe that the child's been, there's some case of some kind of human trafficking involving a child like that. That doesn't happen often. I've been here a few months and I've had 2. And those cases, they're pretty much dealt with at the time that the child comes into customs, right? If they're coming in from out of the country.
And if I could jump in real quick
Yes.
on that, because it's important. This goes back to the awareness. I had not had a single case out of the airport in the 4 years that I was doing it prior to Ben coming along. Christie House did a training for all of the people at the airport. Lo and behold, he comes in, he's been doing this for what, 3.5 months? And he gets 2. So as the awareness is raised, and this is a great example, as the awareness is raised, the calls will come in. And that's important to acknowledge because we're raising awareness every day.
So the law then goes, and hitting on that point, the law then says that, look, we're going to give all of these children services. If a child has been sexually exploited, and we believe the child's been sexually exploited, the state is going to give these children the services they need, unless they're getting services already through the federal government. If the federal government is giving them services through their service providers, and because they have a case that they've identified a child, and the feds are taking care of it, then obviously we don't want to duplicate resources because we need those resources for our local kids. So that's what the law requires. And basically, really basically, that covers all of the new the new law, the Safe Harbor Act, and the amendments to the dependency side that the Safe Harbor Act included in the amending of the House bill, which is House Bill 99. The one other thing that maybe I'll just touch on lightly, but it's important because this does affect everybody. There was another House Bill 1355. That House bill really came about as a result of the situation with Penn State and the Sandusky case. And I don't know if you're aware of the Penn State or Sandusky case. That was a case where there was a football coach named Sandusky at Penn State University, and apparently he was having sex with a number of minor children, some of which he brought on campus and had sex with in campus showers at the football facility. There were some people that were aware of this. They had brought it to the attention of some of the administration in the school, but really nobody ever bothered to contact the authorities. No one contacted the local Department of Children and Families to inform about what was happening. Nobody contacted law enforcement. And at the end of the day, when it came to light, now all of a sudden, there may have been 8, 9 victim children, and everybody was saying that at some point, nobody contacted anyone because they were protecting this guy that was an extremely popular football coach on their very, very, very lucrative football program, right? So in order to try to avoid those things from happening, here in the state, they passed House Bill 1355. And what House Bill 1355 says basically is that if you have knowledge or you suspect that there is a non-caregiver, in other words, it's not a parent or legal guardian of a child, and that non-caregiver is abusing a child, you have a duty to call the hotline. Okay? And what happens is, when you call the hotline will take that call, they'll screen that call, and if in fact it's something that DCF normally investigates, they will send out a DCF investigator to go ahead and do the investigation as they would any other abuse case. If it is a situation that doesn't fall under the purview of a DCF investigation, and if it does, for all cases that come into the hotline that are reports of non-caregiver abuse with children, the hotline will then send a message to that county's sheriff, and it's specifically to the sheriff, not to any of the other municipalities, to that county sheriff, informing them of that situation. Okay? Now that goes for any non-caregiver abuse of a child or any sexual abuse which is considered child on child. Okay? If it's an abuse between a non-caregiver adult and a child, and that includes sexual abuse, then the hotline also needs to be called. Now, there may be cases that DCF fields the call, they screen it, and it's not a DCF investigation. It may just be a straight-up law enforcement issue. But that will be decided between the screening of the hotline and the message to the sheriff. Not making the report, and this is the important part. Having knowledge or suspicion and not making the report is a third-degree felony. Okay? Now, that's the way the law reads. Are you going to be prosecuted if you don't call for something that you see or don't see? Maybe. It probably depends on the severity of what you have failed to report. But if you are a member of a university here in the state of Florida, and there is something going on with one of your faculty, and what you believe is a minor, and you failed to report it, and you had knowledge of it or suspected that it was happening, and in fact, an investigation reveals that in fact it was happening, I guarantee you that they're going to charge you with a felony for not making that report. Good. Okay? And that is based on the Penn State situation, and there was another university that had not a similar issue, but it was an issue with a football team that apparently gang raped a girl, and nobody, and I said, pardon me?
Duke.
At Duke, and nobody reported. Okay, that is why this legislative session they passed House Bill 1355. So it's really to avoid those situations.
Now, the real penalty of 1355, though, is the money. The university, at a university level, if the university is found to be complicit,
Right.
it's not less than $1 million.
Right. Now, yeah, the situation for the universities themselves is going to be tremendously impactful financially, but that's in addition to what the law says. The law really refers to in this particular bill, the law refers to the penalty for non-reporting, and that's what the bill requires. Now, the penalties for universities are going to be extreme, as they are with Penn State, and now they're going through a huge process with paying out and doling out probably hundreds of millions of dollars in civil suits and fines and God knows what else. So it's going to be costly for them financially. But those are the two bills that passed that are directly related. One directly related to this human trafficking issue, which is the Safe Harbor Act. That's House Bill 99, and then the House Bill 1355, which there's some overlap in those cases, because if you know of a child that has a pimp, right? Let's say you know that they have a sexual exploiter. Well, that's certainly an abuse case, right? You certainly have a child, and you certainly have a non-caregiver abuse situation there. So it falls under both. We have a Safe Harbor Act issue there because the child's sexually exploited, and we also have a 1355 because you know that a child is being abused by an adult non-caregiver. So you have both. Yes?
And how did the child come out of that? And is that because maybe that's an indication that one of the children, well, obviously is probably being abused and acting it out, but could they possibly be the like the bottom girl or something like that?
No, well, I mean, that could happen.
And how often do you see that?
That could happen. Well, there are cases of child-on-child sex abuse, and I'm assuming that it is relatively common when you look at situations that law enforcement investigates, rapes, sexual molestations, those kinds of things, lewd and lascivious acts with minors, those issues. But it didn't come directly as it was related to the human trafficking issue. The problem with child-on-child sexual abuse is that unless the child is under 12 years of age or under, DCF doesn't investigate those cases, right? Because there is no parent or legal guardian. Let me rephrase that. If there is no parent or legal guardian that was involved in the situation that resulted in the sexual abuse, because there was an inadequate supervision, because there was some other maltreatment that was related to that sexual abuse, DCF doesn't investigate that case, right? Because you have a child who has an inappropriate sexual contact with another child. There's no parent or caregiver involved in that. And if one of the children doesn't have a parent or caregiver involved in a maltreatment, then it's not a DCF case. It's simple as that. If the child is 12 years of age or under, then DCF has an obligation to go out and investigate that case. Now, this is the child, if the child who is the abuser is 12 years of age or under. So if the perpetrator of the abuse is 12 years of age or under, DCF has an obligation to go out and get that family services. They got to get that family who has a 12-year-old who's been acting out inappropriately sexually, they got to get them services. If the child is 13 years of age or older, it's not a DCF case.
What is it?
It's a law enforcement issue. It's a law enforcement issue. That's why.
So you would never have a guardian involved with the child then?
It depends on if there's a corresponding dependency case. If there's no corresponding dependency case because there's no maltreatment identified by a parent or caregiver, then it's strictly really a law enforcement issue.
Would it be like considered rape or something?
It would be considered a rape or some kind of sexual battery of sorts, right? Because the Department of Children and Family investigates abuse, abandonment, and neglect of children by their parent or caregiver. That is the purview of the department. That's what we do. If a parent or caregiver is not abusing a child, then it's not something we investigate. Now, granted, the law says that in a case where a 12-year-old is acting out sexually, that the department has a responsibility to the family who has that 12-year-old to get them some kind of help, right? Because now a family, how do you deal with a family who has a 12-year-old child who is now the perpetrator of some sexual inappropriateness, right? So we have to really have an obligation to help that family. But other than that, it's a criminal issue. If the parent or the caregiver isn't involved in it, it's not a matter for DCF, it's a matter for law enforcement. So, really, that's it. I don't want to take a lot of your time, but that's basically what the new law says. Those are the two real big laws. By the way, the House Bill 1355 went into effect October 1st. So that's already been, that's already in effect since that time. House Bill 99 doesn't go into effect until January 1st. Really, basically, that's what the changes have been because of this awareness that we're now dealing with these human trafficking and sexually exploited children. Okay?
Wonderful. Thank you very much. That's
You're
great. Real quickly, I'll just give you a coalition update. Connie is in the process of moving, and her life is extremely, extremely chaotic, so she could not be here today, and so she wanted me to express her regrets for that. So I wanted to let everybody know that Gibble's been selected as the volunteer that's going to be the unsung hero for the Community Foundation on behalf of the coalition for 2012, and I think all of those things will take place in 2013. So congratulations, Gibble, and we appreciate all your hard work.
Thank you.
Tim.
With respect to the weekend of prayer, last January we had a weekend of prayer in which about maybe 1/3 of the churches in Monroe County participated in it, just within their own churches, and we'd never had any kind of meeting, but that was done within the churches. We found out too late that there's a person named Thomas Laros from Orlando, who has an organization called Florida Abolitionists, who was trying to have a nationwide day of prayer. But it was advertised. I saw it after the event was already over, so we were not able to participate in it. But this year we have connected with him, so we're working very actively in having that starting January 11th, because that is Human Trafficking Awareness Day. So it's going to be January 11th, 12th, and 13th. And our goal is to get 1 million Christians throughout the nation participating in prayers about trafficking. In part to harness the power of God. If you're a Christian, you believe that God will respond to prayers. But also, one of the ways that God can help stop the trafficking is through increased awareness. There's so many people, they may go to a church in which maybe somebody like Suzette's very active, but maybe they're not even aware of it because the opportunity's not there to present it. So what's going to happen is that all the churches that are participating will be sent a downloadable form about the facts of trafficking, the indications of trafficking, the hotline number, etc. So we hope to get this information out to 1 million people across the country. So it could be one of the most significant awareness events in the history of Human Trafficking Awareness Day. We've got great people working on it throughout the United States. And there's going to be an event. Suzette, it's a little bit too early to talk about, but Suzette's going to be organizing an event in the Keys, at least one, and with a trafficking survivor from Miami-Dade named Catalina Rosenblatt. You know her? And she's agreed to come down to participate in the weekend of prayer. So at least in the lower Keys and perhaps also in the upper Keys, It'd be a question then of getting people together so they can, from different churches and denominations, so they can learn about it and pray. We may also invite some of the people from his house that you gentlemen were just talking about too, to come down.
That's fantastic. I really appreciate all the time that you put into the coalition, and especially finding out about this and helping us move forward there. And we'll see what we can do to get out more information to the churches.
Well, Vicki, if I could just say, it's just so exciting because the plans are in the works for this. Of course, everybody knows that January 1st is the 150th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation. So January 11th, Human Trafficking Awareness Day, follows that by just 10 days. We're working on trying to have a rally on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial about the Weekend of Prayer, which will be officiated, we believe, by the great-great-great-grandson of Frederick Douglass. So you can't get more symbolic than that. And we also have lined up a lot of different good speakers for it. We're working with a lady who's the anti-trafficking coordinator for the United Council of Catholic Bishops, and with a gentleman who now runs the Focus on the Family is going to be participating. So it could be a very historic event.
Well, I know you'll keep us appraised of that, and I can share that information.
First of all, I want to thank Tim very much for getting me involved in this very noble cause. I knew right away that I was going to have a lot of research to do because I was familiar with it, but not enough to create an effective website. So I researched hundreds, maybe even thousands of websites to be able to pull the Site for Keys Coalition, for Keys for Freedom, and for Weekend of Prayer. And one of my favorite pages on all of them is what can you do? You can walk out of this room right now, go look at these sites, and you will find things you can do right away to make a difference. My favorite is going on Backpage and flagging every nasty ad I can see. There's a lot of free material on these sites. You can be your own personal advocate and just go. I mean, there's posters that you can print. There's material even for law enforcement, tapes. If you need any of these printed, you can just contact us on our website and let us know. I can do them for like $30 for 1,000, and you can take them. I put them on people's windshields, on their cars if a door is open. You know, I've even gone to strip clubs and passed them out. I got kicked out of one, but I colored my hair and I went back and they had no idea. Another great idea is Christmas is right around the corner. Some of these sites have items that were created by victims that are going through their own rehabilitation. What better way to give a Christmas gift to somebody? My stepmom gave me some earrings last year. I just loved them. And
Tell the story about your stepmom. That's so inspiring.
Oh, she didn't know I was involved. I didn't know she was involved. She gave me the earrings, and she's telling me this wonderful story about this cause, and she's being, because she knows it's a delicate subject. But I smiled and I laughed at her, and I said, I have something to show you. And I showed her our website. But it's a lot of these victims who are going through rehab are learning how to do things like make clothes, do jewelry. They're getting trained to do a trade so they can go out, and it's a great way to support them and also to explain to other family members and friends about this problem in a delicate way. Let's see, I think that's about it. With Suzette's site of Keys for Freedom, it's a great directory. We're constantly updating it, but what I love about it is that it lists the state in alphabetical order and then the cities underneath that in alphabetical order. So you can click in a certain area if you're away from town or whatever, and you can see what they're up to and what you can do on as well. And if you know of a website that we don't have on the Keys for Freedom directory, please go to the Contact Us page, give us a link, we'll add it on right away. Thank you.
Wonderful.
That's it.
Thank you very much.
Vicki,
Gibble.
Vicki, could I share something real quick?
Sure.
I would like to show you all a beautiful young lady. She's 19 years old. She's the daughter, a niece of a friend of mine in Central Florida. She's been missing since June. They expect that she is a victim of human trafficking. The FBI, the local police in Sebring, as well as the Miami-Dade Special Victims Unit, are all involved in this case. She's such a beautiful girl. She was brought up in church, very close to her family, daily contact, not a runaway, not any problems, but a friend enticed her to go to Miami. She could get a good job there, that type of thing, and then it went downhill from there. There have been different things involved in the whole case to where they really do believe, and it's been in the Miami Herald, that they suspect. Her name, Natanali, Natanlie. A-N-A-T-A-N-L-E, Natanali Perez, P-E-R-E-Z. If you do a web search, it comes up right away. Some articles from the Miami Herald, as well as her family, just trying to get the word out. This is so sad, and yet I'm sure the two of you are experiencing this kind of thing all the time. This is my first time to actually know somebody that this has happened to. And we're just praying she's still alive. I just heard from her aunt, who's like her mother, that it's just so hard every day,
Sure.
not knowing. But I just wanted to show you her face. It's such a beautiful and innocent young woman.
Well, thank you very much, and we will definitely keep her in our prayers, and I appreciate you letting us know about that.